My name is Ella. I'm 31, recently single, barely sleeping, and not sure if I'm losing my mind. This isn't a cry for help. Not yet. It's just, something happened. And I haven't told anyone because, how could I? Who would believe? Me. I moved into my grandmother's old house 2 weeks ago, thinking it would be a quiet escape. A reset. Something about the scent of lavender in the curtains and the creak of the old wooden stairs felt like safety. Or at least it used to, when I was little. But now I lie awake every night, staring at the ceiling, the blanket pulled up to my chin, too scared to breathe. Because every night, it moves. Not by itself. Not in the way blankets shift when you turn or kick them. No. It moves like something is underneath it. And last night, it moved again. This time, it didn't stop. It was just after 1 a.m. I'd been dozing off, the fireplace flickering its last embers when the blanket at the end of the bed started to twitch. Not much, just the subtlest little ripple, like a finger brushing up from the inside. I froze, eyes wide open, heart pounding. There it was again. A pull, a soft rise. Something was under it. My hands curled into fists. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I stared at that lump in the fabric like it might disappear if I just pretended it wasn't there. But it didn't disappear. It started crawling, slowly, upward, toward me. That's when the panic kicked in, full throttle. I shot upright, nearly tumbling off the bed. "Nope," I whispered to the room. "Nope, nope, nope." And then it barked. A short, muffled, pitiful little bark. I blinked. Did I hear that right? It happened again. This time clearer. A bark. I hesitated. My breath caught halfway up my throat. I gripped the edge of the blanket, with shaking hands, and pulled it back in one swift motion. And there he was. A dog. A dusty, trembling, golden-brown mutt, curled up beneath the blanket like he'd lived there his whole life. He looked up at me with the biggest, roundest eyes I'd ever seen, and whimpered. I collapsed onto the floor, not from fear, from shock, and, honestly, from the stupid, overwhelming relief that it wasn't something else. He took that as permission and crawled out from under the blanket, tail thumping once. "What the actual hell?" I muttered, half laughing, half on the verge of tears. "Where did you come from?" The dog didn't answer, obviously. But he did take 2 tentative steps toward me and rested his chin on my knee. I exhaled hard. His fur was warm, real. His ribs showed a little too much. He had no collar. And the front door? Still locked. Windows shut. No sign of forced entry. Didn't know what was more unsettling, the idea that he broke in, or that he didn't have to. The next morning, I made coffee with shaking hands and watched the dog, who I'd started calling Toby for no good reason, sniff around the living room like he owned it. I didn't sleep. I just sat in bed the rest of the night, staring at the firelight, dancing on the ceiling while he curled up at my feet. He hadn't barked again. Hadn't moved. Just stayed close. I'd checked every door and window again this morning. Still locked. Still untouched. No broken screens. No loose boards. Nothing to explain how a living, breathing dog had gotten into my locked bedroom in the middle of the night and crawled under my blanket. I posted in a local Facebook group. Lost dog. Found near the southern edge of Maplewood. No collar. Friendly, golden brown mutt. No replies. I called the shelter. No matches. I drove around the neighborhood, holding a printed flyer with his picture. No one recognized him. No one was looking for him. It was like he just appeared. That night, he followed me to bed again. I didn't invite him, but I didn't stop him either. He stood in the doorway, eyes glowing faintly in the hallway light, and waited until I lifted the blanket. Then he crawled in, slowly, respectfully, and curled up near my feet. I watched him the whole time. Nothing moved that wasn't him. Nothing pulled. No whisper of anything beneath the sheets. I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I slept through the night. 3 nights passed, each one easier than the last. Toby started to relax. He'd wag when I came downstairs. He'd lean his weight against me when I sat on the porch swing. He didn't bark, didn't chew, didn't scratch at the doors. He just stayed, always near, always close. It was like he'd picked me, and part of me, God help me, started to feel like maybe Grandma May had sent him. Like maybe he was here for a reason, a watcher, a protector, until the blanket moved again, and this time, he wasn't on the bed. It was past midnight. I'd left Toby downstairs, asleep by the fireplace. He liked the heat, I think. Curled so tightly that he barely looked real, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I was halfway to sleep myself when I felt it. A pull. At the end of the bed. Just like before. No sound. No warning. Just a slow, deliberate movement under the blanket. My throat tightened. I reached for the lamp, but the bulb blew with a pop before I could touch it. Darkness swallowed the room, and the blanket kept moving. Toby wasn't there. This wasn't him. I didn't move, I couldn't. The weight slid upward, inch by inch. It reached my legs. Paused. I held my breath so long I thought I might pass out. Then, footsteps. Soft ones. Toby. I could barely see him in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. He growled. Not loud, not aggressive. Low, steady. Protective. He stepped forward. The blanket stopped moving. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and in that beam of pale light, I saw it. Nothing. No lump. No figure. Just the smooth, still blanket. Toby leapt onto the bed in one silent motion and pressed his body against me. The blanket didn't move again. That was last night. Today, I didn't leave the house. Toby wouldn't let me out of his sight. I tried to make a vet appointment, but my phone froze halfway through the call. I tried to call my sister, but the screen stayed black. And tonight? Toby's lying next to me. His ears twitch every time the wind hits the window. He hasn't slept. Neither have I. But I'm writing this down now, because someone needs to know. Something is here. It started with the blanket, and I don't think it's done. I barely slept. Not because I didn't want to, but because something inside me wouldn't allow it. It was like my body knew something I didn't. Like it was holding vigil for something. Or someone. Toby stayed beside me all night. Eyes open. Unmoving. Every now and then, his ears would twitch. Toward the corners of the room. The shadows. The hallway. As if he was listening for something I couldn't hear. And me? I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, pretending I didn't, feel the cold breath against my ankle. Morning came gray and silent. No birds, no breeze. The windows were still sealed tight. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of the microwave. My eyes looked sunken. My lips, pale, the kind of tired that sits in your bones. Toby padded into the room behind me. No tail wag, just a slow approach and a nudge to my knee. I know, I whispered, crouching beside him. Something's wrong. He leaned his head into my chest and let out a long, low exhale. I swear it sounded like worry. I gave him some toast and sat. by the fire with my coffee growing cold in my hands, that's when I noticed the scratches. They weren't deep, just faint little grooves on the inside of the front door. 3 parallel lines. Not quite claw marks. Not quite human either. I stared at them, unmoving. I hadn't seen them yesterday. I was sure of it. I would have noticed. They were right above the baseboard, just where a hand or paw might reach if it was trying to get out. Toby growled again. Low, quiet. His eyes fixed on the door. "What is it?" I asked. But he didn't move. He just watched. Like he remembered something I didn't. I spent the rest of the day avoiding the bedroom. It felt ridiculous, like I was giving it power by being afraid. But the thought of lying in that bed again, under that blanket, it made my skin crawl. Instead, I busied myself, cleaned the pantry, organized the books, pulled old sheets off the furniture in the guest room, trying to make it livable. That's when I found the old wooden chest, tucked under the bed, dusty, locked. I recognized it instantly. Grandma May's never touched this chest. As kids, we weren't allowed near it. I used to think it held treasure, or secrets, or her old knitting patterns, which she guarded more fiercely than gold. But now it looked like it was waiting for me. I reached for it. My hand shook. Toby let out a small whine behind me. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't move, just watched. I touched the metal latch. It clicked open. No key, no resistance. Just open. Inside, there were photographs. Dozens of them. All black and white. All old. Some cracked around the edges. Most of them showed the house, back when it was new. But one photo made my heart stop. It was of a little girl, maybe 7, standing in the very bedroom I sleep in now. She wasn't smiling. And under the blanket, on the bed, something was moving. It was subtle, barely a blur in the fabric, but unmistakable. A shape. A hand. I dropped the photo. Toby barked, short and sharp. The lights flickered, and for a moment the whole house felt like it held its breath. Didn't sleep in the bedroom that night. I dragged the mattress into the living room and set it near the fireplace. Lit every candle I could find. Left the lights on. Toby stayed close, but he kept staring down the hallway. Every few minutes he'd growl, just a little, like something was brushing against the edges of his sense of safety. I tried to ignore it. Tried to focus on the warmth of the fire, the steady rhythm of Toby's breathing, the hum of the fridge. But then, it happened again. The blanket moved. Only this time, it wasn't even on the bed. It was on me. I watched it rise, like something invisible, was pushing up from underneath. Toby leapt forward, teeth bared, barking wildly. I screamed. The blanket dropped flat, and the light bulb above me shattered. I ran. Toby chased after me, barking as if he was trying to herd me away from something I couldn't see. We ended up on the porch, barefoot, breathless, heart hammering against my ribs. The cold night air felt like needles in my lungs. Inside the house, everything was quiet again, but I didn't trust it. We stayed outside for hours. I wrapped myself in a towel from the laundry basket and sat on the porch swing while Toby lay at my feet, alert. I stared at the sky, searching for stars, but even they felt distant, hidden, gone. At sunrise, I stepped back inside. The house was unchanged. No mess, no broken glass, no sign of struggle. The blanket was folded neatly at the foot of the mattress. I'd dragged into the living room. I didn't fold it, and I didn't go back to sleep. That afternoon, I called the town library and asked if they had records on the house. The man on the phone sounded confused. "That old place?" he said. "The McAllister house?" "McAllister?" I echoed. "No, this was my grandmother's." "May Reynolds," he replied. "Right. She bought it after the McAllisters. After the incident." My stomach flipped. What incident? There was a long pause. Then, "You should come in." I did. And what I found chilled me more than any cold draft in the house ever could. The McAllisters were the original owners. Moved in during the 1940s, had one daughter, Lila, age 7. In 1952, Lila was reported missing, vanished from her bed during the night. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses. The blanket had been pulled up to her chin when her parents found the empty bed. No body was ever found, no clues, just a cold bed and a moving blanket. I stared at the photo I'd found in May's chest. The girl, the blur, the shape. It was Lila. The librarian handed me another article, a quote from May herself, years later. "I never used that room. Not after the first winter. I kept the door shut and the windows locked. But sometimes I'd wake up to find the blanket moved." I drove home slowly. Toby sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, like he knew what I had learned. I didn't say a word the whole drive. What was I supposed to say? That I think there's something in my house? That it hides under blankets? That it watches? That it waits? That night, I burned the old blanket, took it to the fire pit in the backyard and set it alight. Toby watched from a distance. The flames reached high, but they made no sound. No crackle, no smoke, just heat and ash. When it was over, I buried the pieces in the garden, and for a moment, I thought it might be done. But when I came inside, Toby stopped in the hallway and growled at the bedroom door. Because somehow, the blanket was back on the bed, folded, perfect, waiting. I didn't scream. I wanted to. When I saw the blanket, neatly folded at the foot of the bed I hadn't touched in days, the same blanket I'd watched burn into ash only hours before, something inside me shattered. But I didn't scream. Instead, I stared at it. Frozen, unblinking, waiting for it to move again. Toby stood beside me, stiff as stone. His breathing had slowed, his ears pinned flat. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just watched. And that scared me more than anything, because dogs bark at danger. But Toby, he was watching something he already understood, something I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch steps with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Not that blanket, God no, a different one. And watched the wind move the trees like shadows swimming in moonlight. The forest behind the house had always made me nervous as a kid. Grandma May used to say, "Trees don't talk, but they listen." I never understood that until now. Now they seemed to lean in whenever I breathed too loud, like they were waiting for me to ask the right question. The next morning, I pulled out every box, every drawer, every hidden compartment I could find in the house. There had to be something, anything that May left behind. A letter, a journal, a warning. What I found was buried in the old wardrobe behind her sewing table. A shoebox. Dusty, sealed with tape that had long since crumbled. Inside, there was a stack of letters, all addressed to Lila, each one dated years after she'd disappeared. Some were written in shaky, careful cursive. Some were just scribbled notes. The blanket moved again last night. If it's you, please stop. I still hear you, sometimes at the window. I told them you were gone, but I never stopped looking. The last one, dated only a year before May died, said, She's coming. Back, I feel it. I don't know what she wants anymore. That same afternoon, I found Toby in the upstairs hallway, staring at nothing, his body low, tail rigid. I knelt beside him. "What is it?" He didn't blink. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach twist. There was something, a shimmer, a flicker, in the light. And then, just for a second, I saw her, a little girl, standing in the hallway. She wasn't transparent. Not like a ghost from a movie. She was real, but flickering. Like she wasn't quite here. She wore a nightgown, lace around the collar, no shoes, and her eyes, oh God, her eyes. They were wide, unblinking, not afraid, just watching. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then, slowly, she raised her hand, not to wave, to point, at me. Toby let out a growl so low I felt it in my spine, and then she was gone. I didn't move for what felt like an hour, just sat there on the floor, Toby's body pressed against mine, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that I was exhausted, hallucinating. But the hallway still smelled like lavender and dust, the way it used to when May opened that cabinet to get her old photo albums, and something in the air felt used, like someone had been there, like someone had passed through. I left the house that evening, drove into town, parked in front of the diner, didn't order anything, just sat in the car. Toby watched people pass by through the windshield. I watched him. He wasn't just a stray. Knew that now. There was something in the way he moved. Something about how he always knew where to be. How he always looked toward the room before the cold came. How he always placed himself between me and whatever it was. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and asked myself the question I'd been too afraid to say out loud. What if the house isn't haunted? What if I am? When we got back, the house was dark. The porch light, which I'd left on, had burned out. The hallway smelled like damp, soil, like something had been growing. I opened the front door slowly. Toby went in first. The living room was empty. The fireplace cold, but the blanket, that blanket, was no longer on the bed. It was in the center of the room, spread out like a rug, smooth, flat, waiting. Toby growled, and then I saw it. A single red thread, pulled loose from the corner, leading, across the room and into the hallway. I followed it, past the kitchen, past the stairs, to the attic door, where it disappeared under the crack. I hadn't opened the attic since moving in. May used to call it the memory trap, a place where old things go when they don't want to be found. I stared at the doorknob. My hand hesitated. Toby stood beside me, his nose twitching. I turned it. The door creaked open with a sigh, like it had been holding its breath for decades. The stairs were steep. Dust rose in clouds with every step. The air grew colder, thicker. At the top, the red thread curled around a box, a small wooden chest, just like the one I'd found earlier, only this one was painted with vines. Little handprints on the side, a child's name etched in tiny letters. Lili opened it. Inside, there was a doll, hand-stitched, worn, its button eyes missing, and underneath it, a journal. I flipped it open. The handwriting was messy, childlike. I saw her again. She's under the blanket. She whispers at night. Mama says it's just dreams. But the dreams pull my hair. She said she wants to be warm again. She said the blanket is hers. My hands shook, pages stuck together with age, some smeared with old tears. Then, a final entry. Different handwriting. Older. Familiar. May's. I couldn't save her. I thought I could keep her safe here, but it followed us. It's not done. And now it watches her too. I closed the journal. Everything felt wrong, heavy, like the air itself wanted me gone. Toby whined. Behind us, the attic door slammed shut. Don't remember running. I don't remember how we got back downstairs. I just know that I woke up curled on the kitchen floor, Toby curled tightly beside me. And the blanket? Gone. Again. I've stopped pretending I know what's happening. The truth is, I don't. I don't know why Lila disappeared. I don't know what May was trying to protect her from. I don't know why it's still here. But I do know one thing. Whatever it is, it doesn't want me to leave. It's watching, waiting, and now it's moving faster. I feel it every time I breathe. Toby does too. He won't leave my side anymore. Won't eat, won't sleep. Only watches the door. Every night. Like he's waiting for something, or someone, to come through. The sound woke me up. I hadn't meant to fall asleep. Not there. Not on the cold living room floor with my back against the wall and Toby curled tightly against my side. But at some point during the endless hours of silence and flickering candlelight, exhaustion finally took me. And then I heard it. The whisper. My name. Ella. Drawn out. Soft. Not human. Not quite. My eyes flew open. The fire had gone out. Shadows moved like water across the walls. Toby was already awake, staring at the hallway with his whole body rigid, ears forward, breath shallow. He heard it too. Did you... I started to whisper. Before I could finish, the sound came again. Ella! Closer. Coming from the bedroom. I stood up slowly, legs trembling, heart thundering against my ribs. I didn't want to go. Everything in me screamed run. But something else pulled me forward. Some strange, terrible knowing that if I didn't look now, if I didn't see it, it would never stop. Toby walked in front of me, silent as a shadow, his paws making no sound against the wooden floor. The hallway was cold, so much colder than it had ever been, the kind of cold that gets inside your bones and squeezes. And then, there it was, the blanket, back on the bed, not folded, not waiting, occupied. There was a shape under it, clear, human-sized. Still, I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Toby snarled softly, low and guttural, and stepped between me and the door. But it was already too late. The blanket moved. First a twitch, then a stretch, then the unmistakable, horrifying rise and fall of something. Breathing. I reached for the doorknob, half ready to slam it shut and run, but the shape under the blanket sat up. My heart stopped. And then, in a voice made of wind and ash, it spoke. You shouldn't have burned it. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. The next thing I knew, I was outside, barefoot in the garden, knees in the damp dirt, sobbing into my hands while Toby pressed against me with desperate urgency. The house behind us stood still, silent, watching. Something had changed. I felt it in the air. It had spoken. And not just words. It had known me. I stayed outside until the sun rose. Wrapped myself in a blanket from the car and sat beneath the trees that Grandma May used to read under in the summer. I tried to make sense of what I'd heard, of what I'd seen. But no logic would hold. I wasn't dreaming. Toby proved that. He reacted when I did. He heard what I heard, saw what I saw, and I realized something else. This thing, this presence, it didn't want to hurt Toby. It only ever responded to me, and I think I knew why. I went back inside around 8 a.m., blinking into the gray light. The blanket was gone, no trace of it, not in the bedroom, not in the hall, not in the fire pit, or the attic, or the chest. Nothing, but something else had appeared. On the mirror in the hallway, scrawled in the steam from the night, were 5 letters. Eli stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. My breath fogged the glass. The letters stayed. I spent the rest of the day doing something I hadn't done in years. I prayed, not out loud. Not to anything specific. But I sat on the floor beside the fireplace, fingers clenched in Toby's fur, and whispered everything I hadn't dared say before. I'm scared. I don't know what I did. I'm sorry. I want to understand. And in that silence, for the first time, I felt something different. Not fear, not presence, but pain. A quiet ache that filled the room like smoke. And then I remembered something May once told me when I was 9 years old and afraid of the dark. Things that stay behind usually just want to be seen. That night I didn't run. I didn't sleep in the living room. I went to the bedroom. Toby followed. The bed was bare. No blanket. No shape. Just cool sheets and too many shadows. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, waiting. Minutes passed, then an hour. Stillness. Silence. And then, just when I thought I might finally fall asleep, I heard it again. But not a whisper this time. A cry. A child's cry. From under the bed. I dropped to my knees. Toby growled low, placing his paw over my hand as if to stop me. But I looked anyway. Nothing. Just dark. Empty. Then, movement. A corner of the floorboard trembled, not from wind. Not from footsteps, from beneath. I pulled it up. The wood groaned, and underneath it, a space, a hollow cavity, no bigger than a suitcase. Inside, a second blanket, identical to the first, and on top of it, a photograph. Of me, at age 7, lying in this very bed, fast asleep, and beside me, a blur, not quite visible, but there, watching. My throat went dry. My skin turned ice cold. I wasn't the first to be watched in this house, not the first to be visited or chosen. I held the photograph with shaking fingers. Toby pressed closer. Something deep inside me whispered, "You've been here before." And I realized it wasn't haunting me. It had been with me. Always. Long before May died. Long before I returned. It wasn't Lila who vanished. Not completely. She had been taken. And not out of malice. Out of loneliness. Because whatever lived under that blanket didn't want to be alone anymore. I placed the photograph back in the hidden space and closed the floorboard gently. Then I stood. Toby remained at my side, and together, we made a choice. No more running. No more hiding. If this thing wanted something, it was time I asked it directly. So I turned off the lights, climbed into bed, pulled the second blanket, that blanket, up to my chest, and whispered into the dark. I'm here. The moment the blanket touched my skin, I expected the worst. A hand, grabbing my ankle, a breath on my neck, the return of that whisper in the dark. But nothing happened. Not right away. The room stayed quiet. Still. The kind of stillness that holds weight. Toby lay at the foot of the bed, eyes wide open, head on his paws. Watching. I had left the lights off on purpose. I wanted whatever this was to come, to finish it. And it did. At 2:13 a.m., the blanket started to move. It didn't shift violently. It rose, slowly, gently, a single swell near my stomach, as if something underneath had turned over in sleep. I held my breath. Toby stood, growled, then looked at me for a cue. I didn't speak, didn't move. The blanket shifted again, this time near my side, and then pressure. Soft, childlike, as if a small body had curled beside me. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The unmistakable shape of someone, something, pressing against my ribs. And then, a hand, small, cold, clasping mine. Toby let out a low whimper, but I didn't pull away. I whispered, "I know you're there." The pressure tightened. Not in aggression, in relief. I started to speak, not with fear, but with memory. "When I was 7, I whispered. I had a nightmare. I thought something was under the bed. May came in, turned on the light, and told me to go back to sleep." Silence. But she didn't see what I saw. A flicker of movement. I remember the shadow, the cold, the weight on my chest. I told her a girl was in my blanket. I even gave her a name. Toby looked at me, ears pricked. I called her Lila. The blanket pulsed gently, almost like a breath of recognition. "You were always there," I said. The room grew colder, but I wasn't afraid. I kept talking, remembering things I didn't realize I remembered. Games I played alone where I left a space beside me. Dolls that went missing, only to return days later in different clothes. That time, I woke up with my shoes on the wrong feet. None of it made sense back then. But now, it did. Lila had never left. She had stayed. Hiding in the folds of the blanket, clinging to warmth, to memory, to me. And maybe May had known. Maybe that's why she left me the house. To finish something she couldn't. The hand let go. The weight lifted, but I didn't open my eyes. Not yet. Let the moment pass like a tide going out. And when I finally looked, the blanket was flat, empty, still, and on the pillow beside me, a single button. Old, worn, the kind you'd sew on a doll. The next morning I buried the blanket. For real this time, not in fire, but in earth, deep beneath the old oak tree in the garden, the one May used to call the wishing tree. I wrapped it with care, said nothing, just pressed my hand to the dirt when I was done. Toby sat beside me, watching silently. When I stood, I felt lighter, not happy, not free, but no longer hunted. Life didn't go back to normal after that. But it changed. The house stopped groaning at night. The cold spots disappeared. The hallway mirror stayed clean. And Toby? He started wagging again. He still won't sleep anywhere but beside me. But he's at peace now, and so am I. Mostly. A week later, I found a letter tucked inside the last book May ever read. It wasn't addressed to me, but I knew it was meant for me. If she comes to you, don't run. She never wanted to hurt anyone. She was just forgotten. Blankets were always her safe place, her hiding spot. I think she chose you because you remembered her name. Be kind, Ella, even to the things that frighten you. Sometimes the scariest shadows just want to be seen. That night, I lit a candle by the window, not for protection, but as an invitation, just in case Lila was still nearby, not to pull me under, not to hold me down, but to rest, to sleep, to finally let go. It's been 3 months since the last time the blanket moved. I kept the button, sewed it onto a new quilt I made, one warm enough to keep the cold at bay, but light enough to let the light in. Toby lies on it now, snoring softly. The house is quiet, peaceful. And yet, sometimes at night, just before I fall asleep, I feel the slightest tug at the edge of the quilt. Not a pull, not a threat, just a nudge. Like someone saying, "Thank you," and I whisper back, "You're safe now."